Welcome to the Biscuit Book Club on Joy 620 WRJZ, featuring Marcy and Shelley. Today's conversation will build you up in the faith and encourage you to do what God has called you to do. Brought to you by Simplify Hauling. And now, let's go to the studio with Marcy.
Welcome to the Biscuit Book Club. We're serving up stories with Southern charm. I'm Shelley.
And I'm Marcy. So grab your cup of coffee and maybe a fresh biscuit or two, and we're going to just jump right into today's episode. Shelley, this has been kind of a big week for me. Not a big week, but just like a stressful week. I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but
no, never.
But my husband, I couldn't find my car keys. And I have one of those find your keys, and I saw that they were in Sevierville, which was not near where I was. He had them in his pocket, and so I had to contact him. I was sweating. I'm like, I'm supposed to be leaving right now. So he had to drive back and get them to me. So sometimes technology is good, but sometimes I think it can drive us crazy. How do you feel about that?
I agree, but it's stressful. Oh, my goodness.
So have you ever had that happen where you thought something was true and then it wasn't true? You thought something was there?
But what I love most is when my husband thinks I lost the keys and we find them in his jacket pocket or somewhere.
Yeah. And you're like, when did I put those there? You know what? You're right. I snuck those in there. So anyway, John was a good sport. He drove his dump truck back to the house and brought the keys. But it was a little bit of a stress for me, I have to admit. So, and our guest that we have in the studio actually wrote a book kind of about being stressed, and his is on being tightly squeezed. And you know what? Wait a second. I think he just walked in. Let's check. Hey, can you come in? Yeah, come on in. Okay, so Tim, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for letting me in.
Hey, no problem. We're so excited you're here. This is Tim Holder, and he already has a radio show. We've been on his radio show. Tim how long have you lived in Knoxville?
Goodness, I moved here in 2003, so as we're recording this, 22 years.
Wow. Now, where did you move from?
Okay, so my dad was in the Navy, so we moved around a little bit. So I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, but like I said, we bounced around, and so Knoxville is as much home as anywhere.
Yeah, 22 years is a long time to put down roots. And then you've taught here.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I was full-time at Walter State Community College for many years, and I still teach for them part-time, and I'm also part-time for Liberty University.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
What is the topic that you teach on?
Well, at Liberty, I teach graduate students. I'm a historian, so it's all history-related stuff. And so my background is supposed to be the Middle Ages, but once I started teaching college, I really got interested in early American presidents.
And where did your love of history start?
You know, I want to say, I guess it started with the Lord. The Lord gave me a passion for stories and history. But there were these three triggers in my life that made me realize, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. One of them was when I was in 5th grade, I got stuck in a public library for like 4 hours. And I don't mean like locked in, but my family was just there. I don't know if we were getting a car fixed or what the deal was, but there I was with all that time, and I found a book on the Italo-Ethiopian War of 1935 and 1936. Not one of your more famous wars. I'd never heard of it, especially as a 5th grader. And so I'm reading about it just for hours, and what struck me was there were things in World War I that impacted that war, and then things that happened in that war that impacted World War II. And I saw that history was more than just these random big events, that it was all one bigger story. So that was the first trigger, and I just thought, well, that's really cool. And then in my junior year of high school, I'm sitting in a history class thinking, this would be a cool job, just teacher of history, talking about history all day. And I thought, it's not for me because I feel called to the ministry. But for somebody, this would be a cool job. And then the third trigger was I was out of college. I was working part-time as a youth director, and I saw that a lot of kids grew up going to church, and they went to college and kind of lost their way. And I thought, we need Christians in colleges. That's a mission field. And so that's where it really probably all came together for me. My love of history, my interest in serving the Lord, and here we are.
Wow, that is so incredible. I think that's one of the things I feel sad about encyclopedias leaving. Because everything is, if you want a piece of information, you go to that. But I feel like most of what I was interested in, I would learn because, you have things that are next to each other in this encyclopedia. And pretty soon you are reading about things that you would have never looked up. And I think that we are kind of crippling the next generation by kind of doing away with that. Like you said, you were stuck in the library reading stuff, so you weren't on a phone.
Right, yeah.
Or tablet.
Yes, what a blessing that it's so neat how those things happen that mold our lives.
Yeah.
And the beginning of that started where you were stuck in the library for 5 hours. I love that. And where do you go now, Timothy, for your research?
There are just so many. I like reading biographies of individual early presidents, and so there's just so many of them out there. And really, you learn not just about the subject, you learn a little bit about the author too, and that's why it's good that I've read like a bunch of books over a long period of time to kind of get that bigger picture. Because if you just read like one biography of a president, you're getting kind of the politics of whoever wrote that book.
Right. And then also just the feel of the time period too, because I think sometimes we forget how when the U.S. was still new, when it was changing during Abraham Lincoln, the whole North and South, all of the stuff that was cultural that we have a hard time imagining now even. And then you have Forged in Fire and Hope. And are you fearful that sometimes history might be rewritten with AI and not all the access to the books?
Yeah, I don't really know what to do with AI. I kind of feel like, I just need to let it go. I mean, as an author, and I'm sure you ladies have felt this too, you wonder, could AI start putting the books out, and then what do we do? And so I can't stop that. I can't help that. I just do what I do. And I'd like to think I'm not sticking my head in the sand, but, like we talk about what an anxiety-ridden generation this is because people are doom scrolling on social media, and it's like there was an age where we didn't know everything that was happening all the time, and we were less stressed out. So, we do our part, we pray, we leave it in the Lord's hands. But as far as like just bias in history, yeah, that's out there. What do you do? I'm thinking of Paul in Philippians saying, some are preaching with wrong motives, but at least the gospel's being presented. I mean, that wasn't the best solution, but Paul was locked up. He couldn't stop those guys.
Yeah,
so
right.
he didn't feel the responsibility for trying to control something that was out of his hands.
That's true. I just think that being able to go back to like Lincoln's birthplace and going through the museums, going through their personal writings is so valuable to preserve some of those documents so that it's not just interpreted by something else. Yeah,
go into the original sources. And, one of the things I do is I do a ton of public speaking, and like I'll talk about the faith of George Washington. I do another talk on the faith of Abraham Lincoln. And you can read people characterizing their faith and read their arguments, but then you go back to what Washington and Lincoln were saying personally in their speeches, in their letters, in whatever. And we need to not lose sight of what these guys actually said about themselves and what they were actually doing.
Yes. And I think I mentioned this, but I actually have a small connection to Abraham Lincoln in that my great-grandmother's great-aunt was Abraham Lincoln's stepmother.
Right.
And so Sarah Bush Johnston Lincoln was his stepmother. So when you see the woman with the frilly, nightcap on or whatever, that was her. And he said, everything I am, I owe to my angel mother. His own mother had passed away, and then his dad and her had known each other, and it was kind of funny. She said, I will marry you, but I want my own furniture, and I won't live on a dirt floor. So he went home, he built the floor, he brought her furniture, and she did not read or write, but she did sometimes even do his chores so he wouldn't have to stop reading because he was so studious. And she saw something so valuable in him. And I just thought that was such a beautiful story of her care and love for him. And then he also took care of her. He made provisions for her after he passed away. So
there's a cool thing about Lincoln that I think is inspiring. He only had like 12 to 14 months of formal education, but he had a cousin who said, I never saw him as a kid where he didn't have a book either in his hand or in his pocket, which tells us two things about Lincoln. He had super big pockets, but also he was really trying hard to expand his mind, to grow, to be more than he was. And I think that's cool.
And he was persistent. He was he would persevere. Like, he didn't win the first round. He didn't like if he didn't get something, he kept going and kept bettering himself. And he wasn't a victim mentality person. He was an overcomer, and he was also an overcomer in seeing the potential for others. And I love that about him. So
yes. And
go ahead, Shelley.
And I was going to ask for Timothy, I know you have to read a lot for research. What do you read for fun?
Okay.
Like if you were going to the beach or whatever.
Right. Well, for me, like reading these presidential biographies, that is fun. But when I'm not doing that, and the thing about it is, though, if I'm reading a biography, I've got a pen. It's kind of work. And so sometimes it's good to just read and just be able to keep reading and not have to stop and make notes or underline or whatever. And so more recently, I've really gotten into reading about Christian music artists from the 80s and 90s. I love that music still. And so a lot of those guys and women have written books. And so sometimes, a few times a year, I'll try to grab one of those books and read it. And the other is military science fiction. I had a friend who explained to me the difference between space opera and military sci-fi. He said space opera is like Star Wars, like the big sweeping stories in outer space. Military science fiction is like Star Trek, where they've got military rank and stuff. And so, I like to read that.
Yeah, I guess that's a different genre than I would have ever imagined. Having grown up on Mad Magazine, I guess I was not really exposed to military
science fiction.
Those two words, that's almost like Amish dystopia. You're just like two words you don't think would go together, but military science fiction. I
didn't know that was a thing either, and I was reading it. So.
So, you never know. You could come up with something else, Like you said, Amish dystopia, they wake up and the lights are on.
That could be the next big thing, and you're on the front edge of it.
I am. So anyway, so you're thinking like Sparrow Records, back when Sparrow Records was that's back in the day. So
I just read a biography of one of the singers from Avalon.
Okay.
So that was fun for me because I love their music.
And then just when they were getting going, that was such a big deal. I remember when Maranatha had their stuff, and Debbie Boone came out and all that stuff. So you just didn't see a lot of Christian stores carrying Christian artists than the way it was, the way it became when it was Sparrow Records, and they were more celebrity artists. So.
If you're just tuning in, listeners, we are talking with Dr. Timothy Holder, and he is from the Knoxville area. So he's in the studio with Marcy today.
And then you have a book on who did you write about the Christian artists?
Oh, I wrote a book on the Imperials. It's called Blessed, the Music and Ministry of the Imperials. And what happened was I was on this Facebook fan group, and somebody was sharing some story about the Imperials, and somebody else said, somebody should write a history of this before all these stories are lost. And I thought, hey, I've been known to dabble in a little history, and I really love Christian music, and I loved the Imperials. And so I got together with a guy named Rick Evans, who's their general manager now, and he has sung with the group for about 18, 20 years. And so I figured if he will work with me, he will basically open the door for me to talk to all of these other artists who can give me the stories and kind of the inside scoop. And so it was really so much fun to be able to talk to these people and get that inside perspective and have them talk. And there was a lot of pressure in that business, because it was a business. You got to pay your electric bill, and and you're trying to make music, and it's tough conditions, living on the road, and all of that. But it was just so many of those people are really sincerely ministry minded, and it was neat to see that.
That's nice. And they had to work really hard. It was not like now where things would go out, digitally and stuff like that. They were on the road. They were touring all the time.
There were days where the Imperials were touring over 300 days a year.
Oh, my goodness.
Isn't that crazy?
Oh, my goodness.
That is crazy. And your last book is on being squeezed.
Oh, okay, yeah. This book, Feeling the Squeeze, Success Through Adversity, I kind of backed into it, but the topic. But adversity is something that we all deal with. So, how do we handle it? Do we end up making things better? Or do we make them worse? And what happened was I wanted to do more public speaking about presidents, and I thought I could tell. I mean, these presidents have had some interesting stories. I could tell fun stories. But it's not like a lot of organizations are thinking, you know what we need next month? We need somebody to come in and talk about presidents. And so I had to figure out, how do I make early presidents relevant to listeners today, to audiences today? And so I thought, well, we all want tips for how to get through hard stuff. So I'll talk about the adversities these early presidents faced and what they did. And so I do a series of these talks now. Sometimes they handled things well, sometimes they didn't. But either way, it's a lesson for us.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I love that aspect because I do feel like the younger generation, you hear about all this like, oh, it's been a stress. I'm under stress. I'm under stress. And I'm wondering, do you think that the stress has ratcheted up, or do you think that the tolerance for stress has ratcheted down?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's fun to say, like, well, in 1944, 18-year-olds were crawling up the beach at Normandy, and now, it seems like the stakes are a little bit lower for our typical 18-year-olds, but it is a different world as far as getting on social media and seeing all the things that could possibly go wrong. Like, our generation didn't have to deal with COVID and stories that, if you catch this, you might die. Your parents might die. We didn't have that. And so, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. If you don't wear a mask and somebody coughs at you, are you a carrier now? And so you're reading about all the terrible things, and you're also seeing everybody on social media putting their best foot forward. Or, there's some term, I hope I can remember it, and it's something like trauma bragging, where you see people kind of bragging about, talking about, focusing on their hard times. And so we're comparing ourselves to that. Whereas before, I think we went through our challenges, but we didn't really talk about it. And obviously that has a downside. But, maybe we've made ourselves a little too vulnerable, like we've overcorrected. Yeah,
like the victim mentality and the social stigma of not being a victim.
Yeah. And as you talked about earlier, you had Abe Lincoln, who had this mentality of, I'm going to overcome, I'm going to be successful, or I'm going to die trying. And now part of it maybe is so many things do come easy. We don't learn how to deal with adversity. We just try to avoid it. And
I loved how, like, one time he was campaigning, and the guy who he was campaigning against was doing a really good job. He was a really good orator, and Abraham Lincoln had somebody go get the fence posts that he had hand split, and he brought them to the stage, and he said, I hand cut all of these, so who do you want to vote for? And so they were like, we'll take the guy who did the hard work.
How about that?
And so, I mean, I just think that he was a person who actually had done it and proved he did it. He didn't just think about it and compare himself. He just said, this is what I've done, and this is who I am. And I think that just speaks to the fact that he did know who he was. I am a hard worker, and I will be that hard worker for you. And I think all of this stress and stuff and the victim mentality and the trauma bragging detracts from who did God make you to be so that you could become who he's created you to become. So I think that that's such a great, that's just a great angle to tie in the stress, the squeeze, and then also the presidents.
My wife, Jill, likes to say to the kids, especially when they were younger, we can do hard things. And and that characterizes her life. she can figure out just about anything. But just that mentality of, I've got a problem. What am I going to do to get to the other side of this? Not, oh, woe is me, I'm going to get swallowed up by it. But, okay, here's the problem. How do we get through it?
Mm-hmm. I think Eleanor Roosevelt had a quote that said, do a hard thing daily, something along that line. Mm-hmm. So, and then I actually I don't know that I've met you before here in Knoxville, but NoxCam is how I met Jill. So,
right, yeah. Jill produced a movie for NoxCam. And is involved in some of what they still do, like, on an ongoing basis. But that was her big project with them. There was a movie, Broken Road, that came out, and she was the producer for that.
And you've been on a couple of commercials. Now, were you on commercials with her, or? Yeah,
really the way it got started was during COVID. Jill would get a job, and they would sometimes say, do you have a person who can play your guy? And so she's like, well, as a matter of fact, I do have a guy. And so that's where it got started. And so I was actually in Broken Road a little bit. And, maybe it didn't hurt that my wife was the producer. But, yeah, we've done most of what I've done, we've done together. But there are a few things like local kind of the docu-crime, true crime documentary things. I've done a few of those without her, but most of the stuff we've done together.
That's great. You know what? I think Shelley and I both have talked about this so much as far as, we started this radio show because we had both gone to a conference where a guy had Bill Myers at the Vision Writers Conference in California had said, just say yes to God. Whatever God has for you, just say yes. So we started the radio show from that, and then we've had other guests who have talked about, I just said yes, and that's where it led me. So it sounds like the just say yes story kind of carries over into so much of what you have done.
Do I have time to just tell a brief story about yes?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the best bosses I ever had was my dean at Walter State, Darryl McGee, and he would say, and I was his assistant dean, so, we were really working together there, and he would say, we come from a place of yes. And I remember even being on the phone with a student, and the student wanted something, and I thought, that is totally unrealistic. And I was explaining to the student why she couldn't have what she wanted, and all of a sudden I've got going through my mind, we come from a place of yes. And so just mid-monologue, I started saying, you want A, B, C, and D. We can do A, and we can start on B, and once we get into B, let's just see where we stand. And it just totally changed the entire tone of that conversation and that student's experience at Walter State because of that mentality that, try to say yes. Because the thing is, no is always easier. But yes is so much more fulfilling a lot of the time.
Well, and sometimes it's yes, we can look into this versus yes, we can do this whole thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Two different things.
And yes can stretch us and challenge us. Yeah. And it's not always easy, but it really can form us into a better person.
Absolutely.
Even those challenges.
I tell our grandkids, no means non-optional. So that's the end of the road, not non-optional. There's some things that are non-optional, but I love the fact that just from a point of yes. So Timothy Holder is in our studio. He's a history professor, preacher, author, public speaker, and host of The Leading Edge with Dr. Tim Holder. Right here on this station. Now, when does your show air?
My show airs Saturday mornings at 9 o'clock, and after that it becomes available as a podcast.
Oh, okay. That's actually what we're getting ready to do for ours.
Cool.
Yes, and your podcast is The Leading Edge,
The Leading Edge with Dr. Tim Holder.
And what is that about? What is the core of that?
We interview different leaders on leadership, basically Christian leadership. So we might have an author on one week, a preacher on the next. I've had on some actors and musicians and business leaders. So we bring in a variety of kinds of people. But the general theme is always Christian leadership. We'll always talk about the Bible some because I'm very pro-Bible. I love me some Bible. So.
Yeah, I don't think you can get too much good Bible. I'm pro-bad Bible. Or I mean, like, I'm anti-bad Bible.
Whoa.
I'm anti-bad Bible.
David Clavo, did you hear this? Are you going to fix that?
I'm pro-Bible.
Okay.
I'm anti-bad
Anti-bad Bible. Okay,
when people use the Bible as a in a way, in a weapon.
When they misuse it.
When they weaponize the Bible.
Misuse, yes.
Yeah.
So instead of a guidance. So, okay. Well, anything else that you want to share? I love the book. I love the cover, Forged in Fire and Hope. And
okay. So that book, it's about the religious views of the Mount Rushmore presidents, plus James Garfield, because Garfield was the only preacher to become a president. And so I thought, well, he would be an interesting one to add to that. Yeah,
that is kind of interesting. Have you been to Mount Rushmore?
I've not been to Mount Rushmore. They have a thing in Virginia called Mount Trashmore, but it's not nearly the same. It just kind of sounds like it. It's apparently a lot of dirt over trash. But you complimented the cover. My wife did the cover art for that.
Oh, it's perfect.
Oh,
it's
wow.
beautiful.
Great job.
So we did go to Mount Rushmore, and we had our picture taken in front of it. And you always think, how can somebody not take a good picture? We got the pictures back. It was back in the day with film, and it was just our family with rubble. Like forgot Mount Rushmore.
Oh, no.
But we actually were there. It was pretty amazing. And to think of what those men went through to become who they became.
Mm-hmm.
But it went back probably to, like what we talked about, saying yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Facing adversity. What do you think George Washington's biggest adversity was?
So the Revolution, against the British, and they've got this powerful army, this powerful navy, but the Continental Congress, and you might remember from school, well, they didn't have the power to tax, and they didn't have the power to draft troops, but the individual delegates were supposed to go to their home states and get the support they could, but a lot of them didn't. Some of them were afraid Washington would lose, and so they thought, well, he'll just squander the resources. We need to wait until he's replaced. Then we'll ask the states for more stuff. Some of them were afraid that he would win and then become a dictator, because that's what had always happened historically when a general had overthrown a government. And so it's a testament to how special Washington was that he does win the war, but he doesn't become a dictator.
Hey, for you who are homeschool families, I would encourage you to get this book, Forged in Fire and Hope, because this would be a great historical resource for your kids or just for great reading. But thank you, Tim, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been the Biscuit Book Club, and I'm Marcy with Shelley, and we are so thankful you joined us for books, biscuits, and a little bit of everything in between.
We'll see you next week with another guest, but until then, keep reading and keep it cozy, y'all.
Thank you for listening to today's Biscuit Book Club with Marcy and Shelley. Be listening next week at the same time for great encouragement and a challenge for what God has for your life on the Biscuit Book Club on Joy 620 WRJZ.